now. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Sweet, sweet. Now, I just want to say that before I get started, there is a trigger warning that I want to put out here. Mainly, I do mention suicide. So I just want to put that out there to just pay respect and to not set anything off. So I thought I would start off with that. So without further ado, everyone has a plan. With that shit, it's the fan. Here we go. So in this slide here, there are two versions of me. One is when I was 2 years old. And as you can see, man, I had some drip. I had fashion. I had a pretty good fashion sense. Like I had the little Velcro shoes there. I had a beret. And that was a young, innocent little boy all the way from New Zealand. And then I moved to Australia with my family. And then 20 years later, here is me again in a taco suit, downing a bottle of probably Moscato Rosé. Don't know what it is, but oopsies. Oops, I'm going way too hard. And the one on the right there, this was during my travel days. I was on a bit of a sabbatical. And this Tofe on the right here is someone that was full of insecurity. He was a people pleaser. He was living to be seen, hence wearing a taco costume. I just wanted people to notice me. I was an attention-seeking whore. I lived without any accountability. So I was quite reckless and ruthless. And I just didn't want to be responsible for anything. And the sad thing was, at that point in my life, all I wanted to do was just get effed up. I just wanted to get, how wasted could I get? And this happened for a long period of my life. That it's sad to say that even during my travel days, one thing I wish I did differently was to not get effed up so much, because that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to find the nearest bar, the nearest pub, and not really taking in, I guess, the sights and the surroundings around me. But I did meet a lot of amazing people. Now, what happened after that was substance abuse. Now, I've mentioned here, this is what depression, anxiety can look like, because this is what it looked like for me. This is someone who is masking their insecurities very well. You can see, like, there's a bit of a smile and a smirk in there, but it's really a cry for help. This is the type of content I would only put out on social media. And as a person, it really got out of hand because I was wanting to be other people. And with that being said, I was not happy with the person I was. So it meant, who else can I be? When I'd look in the mirror, I was not happy with that person, just wanted to be other people. And it's just not, there's no integrity in that. And what happened from that, it led into a series of panic attacks. It was my first ever taste of what a panic attack actually is. And it's terror. It's absolute terror. And it led into a lot of mental breakdowns and the start of many big ones. So from there this is what I lived like for like a good year or so, because anxiety and depression for me, it was sucking it out of me because I was emotionally unavailable. I was not willing to live with my heart on my sleeve. I was still continuing down this rabbit hole of substance abuse. And I just felt so unworthy as a person, because I probably had no meaning at that time. And all I wanted to do was be seen. Like, I relied so much on validation to the point of wanting to end it all. And that's all I could really think about. I was bedridden for 16, 18 hours a day. And I had to come back home from my travels because it just wasn't enjoyable enough for me, because there was a bigger problem out there, and that was my mental health. So all I could ever think about was just like, I couldn't find the joy in anything anymore. And it was really catching up with me. So that's how I led into my first pivot, because I am a big believer in, as with the pitfalls that we come across, there are pivots. And this is how I led into running. So that's why I wanted to ask the question at the start, who in here are the runners of the team? Before I went traveling, I was quite an active guy. Like I did a bit of Muay Thai. I would do some team sports. I would always be at the gym. So I did look after myself in that way. However, I hadn't exercised for about a good year and a half, whether that was being in a state of dismal, partying like an absolute animal. So my first thought is I really miss having a discipline or some sort of routine to get me back in, which is how I came across running. Running was something that wasn't natural for me growing up. But as I gotten older, I did watch people run, and the people of all sorts of sizes and shapes that can run. I'm like, well, if they can do it, surely I can. So it was an easy thing to take up. I just had to buy a pair of shoes and just literally leave the house. And that's what I did. I started small. That the hardest step for me was literally leaving after being bedridden of not wanting to be anywhere else. Just leaving the front door and going to the end of the street was the best thing I could have done that day, because that sparked something for me. It sparked a curiosity to the point of running to half marathons, and then being like this image here of me being in a trail at night for a race. And then it led into marathons. So I'm not sure if any of the runners in this group have ran a marathon before, but what I found was it was one of the best things I could have done for myself holistically. So emotionally, physically, obviously, mentally, and spiritually as well. It was a bit of a spiritual experience. And it was almost like a direct correlation of me going through my mental ill health. At the start, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I decided to sign up for this marathon. And it was like the Gold Coast Marathon in 2015, I want to say. I trained for it, and then it comes to race day, and race day ended up being, why the hell am I here? Like, I am absolutely shit scared at this point. I look around, and there's actually a lot of the faces and the body language of a lot of other people have that same look. And it's because they're also first time runners, or it could be obviously nerves. And then once the gun goes off, we start taking off, and it's not that bad. It's like, oh, okay, here we go. I'm with 6,000-7,000 other people, and we run and we're into it. And then everything's fine until I get to the 30K mark, which is what everyone usually says. That's when the marathon usually starts, 30-ish Ks. And it's just a mental slog, to the point where I'm seeing people pass out at 41K, and then across the line at 42. And two things happened. I get really teary because I had overcome something that seemed very impossible at the time. And then I became very addicted. And when I say I became very addicted, it led me to here. So 2016 onwards to about 2018 was when my running career really started to take off. I started dabbling in bigger events. So we're talking anything more than the marathon distance, the 42 kilometers or the 26 miles, is technically known as an ultramarathon. And in 2016, a friend and I, we teamed up and we did 40 events in 1 year. And to put that in perspective, that's more than one event a fortnight. These events range from marathons to 100 miles in a forest. And then this event on the left here, that was 24 hours on a treadmill. Highly don't recommend it. It was an absolute schmozzle to deal with. And it was pretty cool because we had Channel 9 interview us. But this is when I found a bit of meaning in my life because of purpose. I found tribe and I found charity. So I found tribe because I found a community of people who were also pushing their limits, and who were also, there was also a correlation for other people that had gone through their own mental health dilemmas, and I could resonate and I could relate to them. And it felt like a tight-knit family, like a community. So it started to grow when, after doing these 40 events, what else could I do? And in 2017, instead of focusing on 40, my friend and I, we focused on 10. So we focused on quality instead of quantity. 2016 was like, let's just pump out as many as we could. And that means we had the stamina and the endurance, but now it's like focus on let's get creative with this. So in 2017, we focused on 10 big events and we called it the Big 10. And these were 10 different causes, 10 different events for 10 different causes. And they were tied in with youth. Like some of these range from running around a 400-meter track for 24 hours. And that was for a family that lost their dad. And we just literally had to just run laps around this 400-meter track. I remember I ran that event with a guy. I don't have an image of him here, but he had no arms. And I'd known Gary for many, many years. Long story short, he was working at the mines and there was an issue with power lines and he essentially grabbed them and it got absolutely fried. He had to lose both of his arms. And then 2 weeks into his treatment, he gets discharged. And no, 2 weeks after he gets discharged, he signs up for a half marathon. And I met this guy in 2016 and I would just see him at more and more events. And I just learned to love this guy. And he would run with me on certain events. Like, it was so cool. Like, there's some of the people I'd met, and I don't think I'll ever meet anyone else like that. And like, I ran with a blind guy for a long time. And then if we come to this event to the right, that's me standing at Everest Base Camp, about to run the world's highest ultramarathon. The world's highest ultramarathon starts from Everest Base Camp and it ends up at Namche Bazaar. And a lot of people have heard of Everest Base Camp and a lot of people have done it, and I highly recommend it. Don't know if we can go right now because of obviously border restrictions. Though it was really cool to be in such a visceral space and area of the world. There was a lot of people that were trekking to go there, but if you're trekking to just do Everest Base Camp, you have to turn around that day. Like, you can't be there. You can't stay the night. The only way you can stay at Everest Base Camp, like literally camp there, is if you have a permit. And the permit is if you are climbing. So if you're planning to do any of the 4 bases or the summit, or if you're willing to do if you're planning to do the race. So the race here, they had a half marathon, a full marathon, and an ultra marathon. And I was at this point in my life where I just wanted to see how far I could push myself. So I'm like, hell yeah, of course I'm going to do the bloody ultra marathon. I'm coming all the way from Nepal. So did that race, and that event, it was a bit of a shock to the system because it takes 2 weeks to get to the start point. Like, one of the marathon runners died in one of the lodges I was staying in 3 days before the race. So you can imagine how much fear is built into that, because you have to be kind. The mountain, you have to take your time to get to there, or else altitude is a bitch and it can kill you. So I will put this out there. I am not the fastest dude. I am not the guy that's going to win the race. My marathon time, I think, is like 3 hours 45, 3 hours 50. So it's like, I guess that's what is quite standard, but it was more about endurance and how far I could push myself and finishing these races, not as much for the participation award, but just to see if I could do it. So it did come to a point of what's next? What's next? What's next? So what was next for me was this event. This was literally a registered event, and you have to run this event, you have to qualify. So it's almost like there's a running CV, and I felt like I had built enough credentials to apply for this event. I got in, and it's literally what it says. It's a 345-kilometer ultramarathon from one side of Scotland. So I started in a town called Portpatrick in the most southern western point, and it ends in a town called Coxburns Pass, which is not far from Glasgow. So right up the guts. There was, I think, 100 people doing that event, including myself. And I did this event for 2 reasons. The first reason was a selfless reason. Oh, I should say a selfish reason. The selfish reason was to see how far I could push myself. This was the biggest event I could ever do. And it was literally cross country, the term like in the most literal form. And then there was a selfless reason that was to hopefully inspire someone to do something that they've always wanted to do. So when we grow up, there's all these ambitions in our lives. And I feel like a lot of people in this world, and I'll put my hand up, me included, listen to other people's opinions and take on their judgment. And then we listen to their side of the story or what had happened to their experience. And we said, no, that's not what I want to do, when in reality they do. So I wanted to hopefully put in perspective to show a human being is attempting to run across a country. Surely I can ask that person out on a date. That was kind of the mindset. And this event, it was over 12 checkpoints, and I think they gave us 100 hours to do it. So there's no stages. Usually how a stage race works is over, like, say, a distance like that. Everyone runs 80 kilometers the first day, then they sleep for 12 hours. And the next day they run, I don't know, 40K. And then it's like, it's built in stages. This one, you've got 100 hours to get there, and you've got checkpoints. If you don't get to each checkpoint by the certain time frame, you're eliminated. So this photo to the right, this is like halfway throughout it. My race crew took a photo of it, and that's probably like 30 hours into the race. This is summertime, yet it's cold. It's so cold, dude. Like, it's not like Australian summer. Even in Scotland in winter, in summer, it's still pretty bloody cold. And I remember this really pivotal point, and it was about 70 hours into the race. I befriend, and that's hard saying like that. That's like, I can't even remember how far we are into this race at this point, but we're a good like 2/3 in or 3/4 in. And I befriended two blokes. There was a Spanish guy and there was an English guy. And we decided, the three of us, to finish it together. And it's like, yeah, cool, man. Like, we're going to finish this as a team. We've got this. Until I think after checkpoint 9, we came across a runner who was like on the side of one of the on one of the ridge lines. What happened was he was calling out to get rescued because he's just pulling out and he just couldn't go any further. So what we did as good human beings, we decided to stay with him. So we stayed with him. We got the ambulance coming, and there were a good 3 hours. Now it's starting to get cold out there. We're using our emergency blankets to keep us warm. And I don't think there's ever been a time in my life where I could say, like, I'm spooning a 6-foot Spanish man in the middle of the Scottish like hinterland to keep myself warm. Eventually, the ambulance comes to collect this guy. We got in touch with the race crew, and they heard about what we were doing. So they said, look, we're going to add on an extra 3 hours. It'd be rude to not do that for you guys, because you're obviously helping out someone who is obviously waiting out there, and he could have been there forever. So at that point, I went to start moving, and my body has started to freeze up because I haven't eaten, I haven't had anything to drink properly, and I decided to throw my plans out the window because I just wanted to get out there. And logic, there is no such thing as logic at this point. 70 hours into a race, and with minimal sleep throughout it, like I would have a few sleeps here and then, like I'm talking like 1 hour at a time, if that. And that led me to breaking down, and it led me to, how do I say it, have a DNF. So for anyone that knows what the term DNF is in running, it stands for did not finish. I've had a few DNFs in my life, but this is probably the most, how do I say it? One of the most pivotal DNFs in my life, because it made such an impact in a good way for me today. So I'm going to actually play the video of me breaking down. And as mentioned at the top is mentions of suicide. So there is a trigger warning. And to set the scene, this is about to finish into, I think, checkpoint 9 or checkpoint 10. And I'm calling it quits because my phone is about to die. Not just that, like my body is failing. Pretty sure I got kidney failure because all I can taste is metallic. I just don't have the mental capability to go on. I was just over it at this point and I was ready to quit. So this is a video of my race guy, my race crew, of me recording the moment. That's like 1.5 minutes, but I'll play it now.
I'm gonna need you to make sure you share your audio. I think you're sharing your screen or your audio.
How do I do that?
So at the top of your screen, there should be whether it says your screen sharing, there'll be a more options button, a little drop down.
Yeah.
There should be share computer audio.
Oopsie. Oh my gosh, we are going way too far back. I still can't find it. Could you repeat that one last time?
So you should see a little interface in the Zoom meeting thing.
There we go.
You're sharing. Yep.
Share computer sound, found it.
What were your 2 reasons why you did this, Tofe?
Wait, that's a yes?
Yeah, it's working.
Perfect, cool. Push myself at a very gargantuan level. At a level. How do I say this? At a level I didn't think was possible.
What was that second one, bud?
And I'm still going off the first one. Well, throughout that race, I would keep going. Physical pain isn't as bad as emotional pain. And I would always resort back to time of... Oh my gosh. I think it's about there. It's a time I was ready to kill myself. A couple of times actually. So I'm just grateful to be on the track, no matter how fucked it is. And then the other one is like, you know what, empower people. Because I didn't think it was possible to turn everything for 180. If I can just get one person, I know it sounds like a bad business though, it's like with the book. If I just can get one person, then I'm all sorted. Yeah. But 270 kilometers. Well, it's probably like 280 actually. Perfect. Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, cool. I'm glad that works. So yeah, what was happening at that point was an identity crisis. At that point, I did not want to be a runner anymore. Everything was kicking in and I was lost as a person. What actually happened was I went through another mental health breakdown. So I was at this point where I'm advocating mental health. I am pushing my body through the limits, yet I wanted to throw that all away. And I was ready to start from scratch again with I lost myself as a person. And there's a saying I had I had a conversation with a friend not so long ago, and she used the example of when we're kids, there's this question that gets thrown out to us called, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And that played on her for 30, 40 years to the point she passed it on to one of her mentors. And her mentor said, we should be reframing that from what is it that you want to be when you grow up into what is the life that you want to lead? And that has stuck with me ever since, because it's about the characteristics I have as a person, as opposed to the title I have. And I just thought that was so fascinating. And it really rang true, especially with this next stage of my life, that the pitfall I'd been was an identity crisis. I had built this persona up, and I literally went from this guy that was this party animal to now this guy that was seen in the public who was doing these crazy events. And this is when I learned to ask for help, because I needed to. I reached out to a friend, and he was involved in a lot of men's work. And that's when I started getting involved with a lot of therapy, being involved with support groups and men's work myself. And I'm so glad I did, because this is how I was able to figure out exactly what my demons were and look them in the face and give them the love they need. The monsters also need love too, because they are part of who we are. So during this time, I was able to process a lot of emotional trauma. I was able to realize why I was acting who I was. Even during the time of being this party animal, the insecurities were still there until I decided to actually look at my shit. Like, I told myself I was unworthy. I told myself I was unlovable. And that's why I could never be in a relationship. And I had commitment issues. I had trust issues, and I had trust issues around men. I had abandonment issues, and there was all these things I was able to address, and it made me understand who I was as a person. And this was the start of a self-love journey. It made me really appreciate the ups, the downs of myself, all the ugly things as well as the good things, because as soon as I repress or deny any of the stuff that no one wants to see, then I'm starting to lose myself as a person because of perfectionism. And that's how I was able to find this help I need. I still help these guys, and that's the way how I give back. I'm part of more facilitation now, so I can help other men who are also in my situation. And it's just been an incredible journey to actually go from that to that. So from there, we are going into 2020, 2021. That's the time of COVID. And what COVID taught me was how to slow down. If you can follow the trend of me, I just put so much stuff on my plate because I was just a natural born people pleaser. So during the time of COVID, it taught me what I really want in life, and what are the things that actually matter. And something that mattered a lot to me was during my reflection was fulfillment. And when I say fulfillment, and I'm going to speak on behalf of my own stuff, so like no one can take, I hope no one takes this on to go, oh, Tofe told me to, but I ended up leaving my job at this point because I was just not happy with it. I was just not growing anymore. And then that was the next pitfall I went into. So with the trends of what I talk about, when there's a pitfall, there's always a pivot that can come into it, like an adaptation. And that led me to this point now. So I was able to turn something that created a lot of unfulfillment into what is my day-to-day. And I was able to turn my side hustle full-time. And it all kind of links back to running. So in 2016, when I was doing the photo of the treadmill, I was blogging that entire journey. I was documenting it, and I was interviewing runners all around the world in a typical Q&A format until I decided to record the conversation. And recording the conversation, it was done in such an amateurish way where I've got my phone on loudspeaker and I'm trying to record through computer recording software, like a lot different to it is now. Got really curious with conversations as someone who realizes that connection is actually a value of mine, like a high value, that I stuck through that, and I immersed myself into knowing what does it take to be a good guest? What does it take to be a good host? I wanted to know everything on the back end. So I started editing a lot to the point of clients paying me. And that was such a cool thing to realize, oh my gosh, there's opportunity in this. And then I took the leap of faith. And it's such a cool thing where I get to help my clients, who are essentially podcasters, save a lot of time. And that's by looking after the editing and the strategy. Now, if I break this down into 3 key learnings, which I've set off here. The first one is, and these are key learnings, like obviously I've been talking about myself, and that's to give context, but there is always a lesson in everyone's story, or lessons, and how they could be applied to your situation. The first one is adversity is a blessing in disguise. Now, I'll just use the recent example of podcasting. If it wasn't for the dark times during my travels, then I wouldn't have taken up running, and running wouldn't have led into podcasting, which is my full-time job today. And I'm 100% certain that everyone that is listening right now has gone through some sort of hell in their life. And if it wasn't for that hell, then it wouldn't have shaped them who they are today. The second key learning is about boundaries. As mentioned, I was a natural born people pleaser. And with that is the inability to say no, because I was never taught that. If anything, what was modeled to me was put more on your plate, because the more you have on your plate, then the more you'll feel enough and the more you'll be able to please everyone. And the problem was I had this knack of being able to fill everyone else's cup up except my own. So now today, when I don't have a problem at all saying no, and if anything, I love saying no, and it's just something that I've had to rewire. And if I don't have, because I am my most important person in my life, and if I can't fill my own needs, then no one else can. And it's the same with love. If I can't love myself, no one else can. And this is where I have to start. I started to, but learning to say no was one of the best things I could ever do, and I highly recommend it. And the last one is, as you can probably see, you don't need to attempt to run across Scotland to know you are enough. And as someone that you've probably only heard their voice for half an hour, I'm telling you this now, you are enough. You are doing plenty. And yeah. So I do have one final pivot before I finish this off. And it's my forthcoming pivot. And it's a very exciting time. And I don't know if there's any pitfalls, but I'm just going to go straight into it. But in the end of July, I actually have a baby on the way. So it's something I'm so excited for. We've wanted this for a while, and my partner is taking it like a champ. She's just, we're just having this absolute blast as she's going through this process into motherhood, and as myself into fatherhood. But what I do know is that with all the lessons I've gone through, it's helped me shape the person I am today, to help me support and grow a little human that knows they are loved from day one. And with that, thank you for listening. That's me.
Thank you very much for sharing. Now, do we have any questions? Anyone online, maybe? No? Go on one.
Oh, I do. I've got a question.
Shoot, Kat.
Hi, thank you so much, Tofe. That was a really great presentation. As you can see, I'm multitasking, just taking the kids to music lessons. I wanted to ask you about when you did the your Everest ultra marathon. Was it altitude sickness that actually took the life of that guy? The other guy on your race?
Yeah, it was a she actually, and it was altitude sickness. So there's 2 types of altitude sicknesses. There's one called, the acronyms is HAPE, and the other one is HACE. So HAPE is high altitude pulmonary edema, and there's high altitude cerebral edema. Essentially, that's when liquid leaks into those organs, and yeah, things start to clog up. I believe she had HAPE, which is when it started to leak in her lungs. If I elaborate on that story, so there was an extra part of the package where you can climb one of the other mountains in the Nepal region, in the Nepali region near Everest, and we climbed that. And that was as high as Camp 2, which is pretty high. Like that's much higher than Everest Base Camp. And then for us, we were well accustomed to that altitude. We get to Everest Base Camp and, oh no, we're leading it back into Everest Base Camp and we stay at lodges every day. And this is when this chick and her crew rock up and she had rushed it essentially. And then the morning of when she died, it was very traumatic in the sense that they couldn't find a doctor, but they found out that one of the runners from this event was staying at the next lodge up, that they got her to come in. And I don't know if she didn't feel the need to have the emotional responsibility because she's like, I'm not here to be a doctor, I'm here to be a runner. And she just got really triggered. And then she started like having a panic attack and started screaming. And then all I could hear that morning was in these like thin walls lodges is get the oxygen, she's going to die. And unfortunately she passed out that day and they had to crowd a helicopter. And yeah, it's pretty scary stuff. And
wow, that's pretty hectic.
Leading into a race. And it's like, oh my gosh.
I think the other thing you were talking about, and I think it was, what I don't know, I guess I didn't really think about before when you were showing that video of you at your DNF moment. When you have that physical, when you're pushing yourself physically, how much you're pushing yourself emotionally as well, like both in the same capacity to ultimately to breaking point.
Yeah, there's the mind can push more than the body. It's so crazy. Especially like meeting Gary, who's the guy with no arms, and meeting Damo, who's this blind runner. And these guys they've learned to just rewire their brains. And I learned a lot from them indirectly as like these mentors where I'm like, well, if they can do it using perspective, then surely I can. And I was using a lot of perspective and it just got to the point where physiologically I just couldn't go on anymore. And I tried to push on, but I'm like, my kidneys are screwed. This is not worth it anymore. And I'm glad I didn't finish it because I probably would have kept going. What is the next biggest race? What's the next biggest race? And it took me, I did not finish, to go through an identity crisis and to really ask for help and to figure out what was going on and to really see what were all the shadows behind me that were driving my behavior. Because it wasn't a healthy way of living. So now, because of that, I feel okay to talk about the downs of my life to a crowd full of people and not have to judge myself on how that will come out.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's it from me.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have any advice on how to stop your nice coping mechanisms from turning into an absolute obsession and a crutch? Like how running became for you? Because I do that literally every time I find a hobby. I do it to the death till the point it doesn't do what it originally did for me.
Yeah. I'll put a disclaimer in, like, any advice I give, like I'm not like a practice expert or anything. So this is just someone speaking on behalf of their own experience. Look, part of that I can relate because, as you probably heard, like I took running and then I took it to such an obsessed level. How far can I push it? But there's always that question, like, is this serving me? I always have to ask myself that. And if this is serving me for the values that I have, then yeah, keep going. And if I'm doing it to push myself, otherwise, if I'm doing it and it becomes detrimental on how I live and how it impacts my loved ones, then it may mean that I may have to put a pause on it, or I may have to pivot slightly. So I'll be completely honest. I actually, after that event, I am still dealing with that identity crisis, if I just keep it honest. And I haven't been called to run any big events ever since. Like, I think when I got back, I had done maybe 2 more events including a half Ironman. And ever since then, I'm like, I just don't feel called to running. So even then that has pivoted to the point of what else can I do? Like I took up tennis and I took up yoga and I took up Pilates and all these other different things, which are great for injury, by the way. It was such a great thing that I look at going, oh, that's a closer chapter now. What else can I do? But I guess the question I always have to ask myself, is this serving me for at least what I stand for? And hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
I have a question as well, Tofe, if you've got time.
Yes, of course.
How do you handle like the fear of like turning your hobby into like your full-time job, or like what were the emotions going on there? Like if you were secure enough, I know you said you had like clients that allowed you to go through that process, but I just want to know more about how you felt through that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. There was a lot of imposter syndrome at the start, I'll be honest. As soon as I deem myself as an expert in something, then there's a tidal wave of thought going, I don't know everything in this, that if I don't know everything, then I don't feel qualified for someone to pay me, especially for that. And that was what I was going through at the start. And I went through a lot of that in the start of this business. It's dissipated now because I definitely feel a lot more confident in my abilities. But it was, how did I come across that? I guess it was lying into like, there was a strength. I guess it was a mix of, I can do this for 24 hours a day because like, I found a connection with literally connection and loving conversations. That was just something that I could do 24/7. And it was just something I wanted to immerse myself in. And then it was just figuring out, how do I monetize on this? And that answer came to me when someone that I'd known for many years, who is still a client of mine, said, I know you're good with this stuff. I know you're decent with the techie side of things. Why don't I just pay you? Sure. And then I took it on like undercharged everything because I just wanted to see if it worked. And I kept going at it. I learnt, like, I got obsessed with learning everything I could in that craft, because as like, I think Malcolm Gladwell said, like, to be an expert, it's like, you got to have 10,000 hours in that. I'm like, how do I fast track that? And how do I learn as much as possible? And just being okay with it. And is it something that if I'm not getting paid doing, would I still be doing it? That was also the other question. Like, yeah, I'd probably still be editing podcasts for my own or helping out a mate. But that was like the starting step. And then from there, it's like, all right, how do I scale from there?
Thank you.
No, of course.
Do we have any other questions? No? All right, well, thank you very much for your time today, and congratulations on the little one. I hope it's an amazing adventure. And yeah, is there any way we can get in touch with you or follow you, or do you want to shout yourself out?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening, everyone. The best place to find me is probably, I'm going to say LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to reach out to me. That's probably where I hang out on the most. Yeah, I have Instagram, but if you want to get have a chat with me, Tofe Evans on Instagram. I'll put it in the chat here if it helps. And that's actually might. Oh, that's fun. And then in there, I've got, I guess, the links to everything I do. And then, yeah, just happy to start the conversation, and feel free to reach out if there's anything that resonated for yourself. And yeah, that's all I got.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you for giving up your time this afternoon. Right.
Thanks, Tofe.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.